Hello and welcome back to Barkerways. I thought we'd come into the engine bay corner. We've done a lot of videos on cars and cars that we've been up to, so as always we're not bored. So what's been going on in the engine bay corner? We've got a 246 Dino engine and gearbox here that's all been completely rebuilt. The body shell's currently over in the body shop being fettled over there. So it's another full restoration. So that's come on nicely. So it's had engine, gearbox. We're just sorting out sort of plug leads. Carbs are all done. For the sharp iron amongst you, it's got a little electronic ignition fitted, which makes it more reliable. And as you can see over here, we've got two more 246 engine blocks that are coming through the system. There's cranks and things to go away for balancing. There's another set of carbs, bits and pieces going on, ready for the next one. And over on the right, there's another gearbox that's all ready to go. So the gearbox is done, it's just waiting for one of those blocks to go on top of it. So there's lots going on over here that's coming along nicely. Okay, so something else we get involved with. Obviously cars have got engines and gearboxes, but they've also got back axles. So we overhaul those as well. So this is the Maserati 3500 back axle. We've done the brakes, we've done the diff, half shafts and everything. So this is sort of pretty much ready to go back in. Something different on this, and I haven't seen this for a few years, is what's known as fully floating half shafts. Now, you've all seen a half shaft. So you've got the diff in the middle, and there's a solid shaft goes through the axle and bolts onto the hub, so obviously to transfer the drive from there to there. Normally, that is just supported by a solid roller bearing that mounts in the hub about here. So the shaft goes down the middle and sticks into the diff, and that keeps it sort of rigid in one place. Now, what this has got is what's known as a taper roller bearing. So that's a fixed roller bearing with basically ball bearings in. This is a taper roller bearing, and normally what happens with taper roller bearings, you have two, so you have one here, and you shim the difference in the middle, and that gets the clearance because the two cones work together. So this has one of those in here, so there's an awful lot of shimming involved with this one, which is different from just pushing a bearing in. So that was a bit of a trip down memory lane to set up one of those. Haven't done one of those for a few years. Okay, so other things that are in here, we've got obviously the Maserati. This is the block for the Maserati 3500 that we're doing at the moment. That's just come back from being rebored, and it's been like boil washed and clean. We don't media blast our blocks because I don't want to risk getting the media blasting into the oils. So that's been in like a boiling oil wash sort of thing. And we've had new pistons made. Let's get one of those. So we couldn't get pistons for 1960 odd Maserati, so we've had these specially made. So these are forged aluminium high compression pistons, so they're really nice. It's taken a while to get here, but they're here. So that's starting to come together, and the cylinder head's just come back. That's had new valve seats and everything put in it, and valve guides and everything. So I'll slide this out of the way. Something else we're up to at the moment, we've got a Daytona on the go at the moment, so we're doing a Daytona gearbox. Now, Ferrari did play around with different configurations. You've got engines in the front, gearbox in the middle, axle at the back, which we've just seen with the sort of Maserati sort of setup. You've got the mid-engine cars, which have got the engine on top, gearbox underneath, a bit like Minis, things like that. So it's a space-related thing. So what they also did was called Transaxle. So you had engine at the front, then you had like a torque tube that came on all the way through the middle of the car, and you put the gearbox and the diff at the back of the car. It was a weight distribution idea that you got, rather than having all the bulk of the weight of the engine and the gearbox in the middle, you had some of the weight at the front with the engine and some of the weight at the back. So it was a weight distribution issue. They carried that through Daytonas, 275s, 4Cams, all that sort of era, and it worked really well. So what you get is a nice compact unit that you've got the gearbox sitting in here, and then the diff goes at the back with all the so your diff sits in there, and then the drive shafts come out the back, and this sits right at the back of the car, so the drive shafts come out and go straight out to the rear axle or the rear hub. So again, something a bit different. So it's again very compact. You've got a 5-speed gearbox, all synchro mesh. You've got limited slip diff, so you can see here we've got the limited slip diff plates. They're like little clutches. I've done some stuff on these before, but these little clutch discs, what you don't want on the hard acceleration is for one wheel to light up and spin the wheel, because it means you don't get forward motion. So what happens in that situation, if one wheel starts to spin, these little clutch plates bite on these, so one side's fixed and one side's moving, so they bite into there and it means that both rear wheels turn together. So you get forward motion rather than sitting here with one wheel spinning on the inside. So it's quite advanced. So you've got 5-speed synchromesh gearbox and a limited slip diff, all in a fairly small unit. We always show off the nice shiny engines and gearboxes that we've all done here, but if you go back a few months before they get all clean, these cars' engines don't come in all clean and shiny. So this is a Daytona that we're just starting to do. So we're in the sort of messy stage at the moment. So we dismantle these engines, and they are dirty, they're messy, and then we wash the whole engine bay down when we start going through the assembly. So the sort of things we find, now this one, it was a car that's come in. We haven't seen it before. It's had some work done on it before, but there's strange things that you find. All these cars have got a history. So you've got carburetors that look like this. So this is the sort of stuff we start with, that it's all a bit grubby, it's all a bit dirty, it's tarnished. So we'll send it off for, this will have sort of 3 or 4 processes on it. It'll get vapor blast, cleaned, plated, doing all the jets. So we do start with all this stuff that's in a bit of a mess. Other things we found on this is a really weird one. When we stripped this car down, we found that the cam timing was out. So we thought, okay, something's happened there. Then when we took the cylinder heads off, we found that the valves had been hitting the pistons. So when you see here, if I get a valve, what's been happening, picking up an exhaust valve, you can see these pockets. These pockets in the pistons are designed just to stop the pistons hitting the top. So as the piston opens, there's only about 1.5 millimeters of clearance, so that the valves are going up and down, pistons are going up and down, the stuff all meets in the middle. If you look very carefully on this one, you can see the valve's been hitting the piston. So where the cam timing's out, so basically where this was going down and this was going up, they were meeting in the middle. Now that's bad, because what happens is, A, it damages the pistons and it can damage the crowns, and A, it bends the valves, and then the valves don't seat very, very well. And you can see on some of these, the telltale is that the piston rings are not moving. So you need the piston rings to move on a piston, and these ones are pinched up. That one's seized in the top. Whether that's just dirt and old age, or whether it's a result of the valve hitting the top of the piston and compressing the piston ring gap slightly, don't know. But either way, we can see that the piston rings are seized up. The other thing we noticed on this one, and this is really funny, there's 2 trains of thought on this, that the valves have all rolled over the edge. There's like a metal bead round here that is really strange. What it's turned out is that the valve seat, you normally have a valve that seats where that goes up and down in the cylinder, in the valve. The contact area is usually about sort of 2 or 3 mil. You can see there's a little cone there, and there's a cone on there and a cone on there, and they sit together. Because these have all worn and rounded off, the contact area is about 0.5 millimeter. 0.1 millimeter. So there's no valve. This valve wasn't seating when it went up and down in there. It wasn't seating in the hole, so the exhaust gases would be escaping, losing compression. But what happens then, when exhaust gases escape very quickly, it's like a welding torch, because this is obviously under extreme pressure, and it'll just take the top of the valve off. So this is a strange one. So this was going to fail fairly soon anyway, this engine, through lack of compression. Something else we found, so obviously to make the valves go up and down, you need something to push them up and down. So that's done with the camshafts. Obviously you've got the lobes. By that rotating, it sits in this bucket goes up and down. The bucket's got a valve on the top, so it pushes the cam, pushes the bucket pushes the valve opens. So what you have is this bucket sits on here, and every time the lobe comes around it pushes it. So what we find is that the cams wear. Now these are case hardened, so it's basically a hard shell, so that it's a steel camshaft, but the top sort of microns of it are very hard, so obviously as the buckets are wearing against them. And this one, the case hardening's gone, you can feel they're all rough. So then what you get is a rough surface that then, smooth surfaces go around nicely. If you get a rough surface, it's going to wear both those surfaces very quickly. So unfortunately the case hardening's gone on these cams, so we're going to need some new camshafts. So while we're talking valves, we've mentioned this before, that during the 70s that Ferrari had the idea of sodium filled valves. There's an old one that we did, that we always break the heads off. It's the exhaust valves that have this. So they drilled the stem and hollowed it out and put some sodium in. You can see this one's leaked out over a while. So they had sodium filled valves. The idea was to disperse the heat away from the seat, but the reality was because you drill a hole down the middle, it made the walls thin and the heads fall off. So we always break them. So this one, we've broken a valve, so that's an exhaust valve that sits like that. We've broken it in half, and this is a solid valve. So this is a clear sign that this car has had some work done. We believe this car's had some rebuild work, which is apparent, but clearly someone's done the valves. So that's that one. Something else we found on this, the timing chain. This is the gear that goes on the crankshaft for the lower timing chain gear, and you can see you've got a dog on there and a hole on there. So that's supposed to sit in that slot like that, and then the timing chain goes on. What's happened on assembly is you can see it's worn through, so that dog hasn't lined up with that gear properly. So what that means is the timing chain's been running out of line. So you've got a fairly sort of large timing chain, so that sits on there, and you can see what's happened. It's worn all the gears on the edge, so you can feel it's really sharp. So this was slowly filing its way through the timing chain, so that was going to fail at some stage as well. So we're starting to find quite a lot of sort of things in this engine that it's a good job that it's coming apart, because it wasn't going to run for that much longer. On the underside of the block here, the crankshaft sits in here, and it's held in with these big end caps and shells. Now these are all numbered, so what happens at the factory, they put those in and they'll line bore those, so all the semicircles and the circles all match, and then they number them. So they line bore the block, so then these all have to go back in the same place, because if you need the two halves of the moons to match. When we took this apart, they were all in different places. So these are all numbered, and they number the block, so you put number 3 with number 3 and number 5 with number 5, but we found them all mixed up. Again, it's just something that you find on these cars. As I said, they've all got a history, but clearly this car, because the result of that was it's worn all the shells. The ones where it hasn't sat against its other half properly, the crankshaft hasn't sat centrally in the two moons, so half of it is not worn at all, the other half's gone right through the shell and into the copper. So clearly all the little things that we found on this engine wasn't going to last much longer. So what I thought we'd do, we'll follow the journey of this engine through, the machining, sorting all these problems out, and follow it right through to the end.